This time on Film Ranker, we are looking at the films of David Fincher. Fincher got his start making classic videos like Vogue and Freedom 90 before making the jump to film. 10 movies later, he is one of the best known and most well-respected filmmakers working today. And while we wait for his upcoming film, Mank, hopefully later this year, let's take a look back at his full filmography from worst to best. Number 10, Alien 3. Fincher's first foray onto the big screen was following in the giant footsteps of Ridley Scott and James Cameron with the third entry into the classic Alien series. Alien 3 is the divisive result of a tumultuous production, and even Fincher has gone on record saying that he hates it. But despite all that, there are some redeeming qualities. It's a gritty take on the franchise with a few fun performances from folks like Paul McGann and Charles S. Dutton, and it is a bit of a turning point for Ripley, who goes full head-shaved badass. When even the director hates it though, it's kinda not a great sign. Number 9, Panic Room. This film kind of flew under the radar, other than jokes about Jared Leto's terrible cornrows. It's a smaller movie than most of Fincher's work, not surprisingly, since most of it takes part in the titular room and the surrounding house. The acting's actually pretty great. Forrest Whitaker, Dwight Yoakam, Jodie Foster, even Leto, cornrows and all. And it does a really good job of building up tension. There just isn't that much to it. In the end, it's solid, but a forgettable thriller. Number 8, Gone Girl. It is pretty amazing that Fincher was able to take what is ostensibly a very simple beach read of a novel and milk it for all that it is worth. Fincher dives into the ins and outs of this story of a woman who attempts to fake her death and pin it on her husband. Even if the twists are telegraphed, Pike is a complex enough psychopath and Affleck is a layered enough victim that the story remains compelling. It also helps that Tyler Perry and Neil Patrick Harris absolutely ace their supporting roles. At times it's a little bit frustrating and difficult to watch just because of the narrative, but in the end, the filmmaking is excellent enough to pull it up. Number 7, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Benjamin Button is Fincher's least Finchery film. It's bright and nostalgic and even a little bit heartwarming. Based on the F. Scott Fitzgerald short story, it's a slightly Forrest Gumpy tale of a man who ages backwards. The Oscar-winning effects and makeup are brilliant, as is Fincher's cozy recreation of the 1920s. The runtime is a little bit overstuffed, but the story generally keeps moving enough to fill it, and the performances are more than up to the challenge of overcoming what could have been a very saccharine tearjerker. It might be a smidge too Hallmark for some, but it's got enough about it to win over most. Number 6, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The biggest knock on this 2011 remake of a 2009 Swedish film is that it is unnecessary, and that's a pretty fair criticism. The original was just fine, but taken on its own merit, it's hard to argue that Fincher's version isn't the better film, even if we didn't necessarily need it. Fincher takes his trademark use of light and dark and color to another level here, with a movie that is as bleak on the outside as it is at its core, but with just enough brightness and beauty to light the way through the tangled mess of murder and abuse, and the whole thing is expertly driven by a terrific soundtrack from Reznor and Ross. Number 5, The Game. From a purely directorial standpoint, Fincher does have many better films that are lower on this list. The Game looks very 1990s, but if we focus on pure story and watchability, The game more than makes up for its flaws. The Michael Douglas-led tale of a man caught up in an immersive game does a great job of making you doubt your instincts even after it's already fooled you half a dozen times. The is it still a game or isn't it labyrinth of twists stays interesting throughout, and that is as much to do with Fincher's clever direction as it is the very clever script. It's a memorable experience that plunges the viewer into the action in a unique way. Number 4, Seven. After the rocky production and reception of Alien 3, Fincher needed a big win to get him back on solid ground, and he more than got it with his second film. Seven grabs you from shot one and keeps up the momentum right through to Brad Pitt yelling about what is in that box. John Doe's kind of the original Jigsaw, though the package is much more than just another serial killer movie, with Freeman and Pitt bringing three-dimensional life to the detectives and Fincher creating tableaus that were creepy enough to give us all recurring nightmares for years. Number 3, Zodiac. This is kind of Fincher's grown-up version of Seven. Based on the true story of the unsolved Zodiac killings of the 60s and 70s, it's a slow burn, but one that lingers. There's a smoky, noirish 70s cop feel to it, with Fincher combining his usual smooth movements with a couple of clever tricks like in the murder sequences. The story's fascinating. While the horrifying crimes certainly have the spotlight, the real focus is on the people involved in the investigation, putting us into the heads of the obsessed detectives and leading us down the same dead or maybe not so dead ends. It's a subtle, nuanced movie that takes the on-screen paranoia and dumps it right in our laps. Number 2, Fight Club. Chances are when you mention David Fincher to anyone that was between 15 and 30 years old in the late 90s, this is the first film they will think of. Fight Club is a cultural touchstone that inspired a legion of they were never really there copycats. And I don't care if you've figured out the twist or not, you have to admit that it works. It's a little bit revolutionary, a bit satirical, a lot violent, all with a specific style that is very much its own, which is generally a pretty good recipe for a cult film. Plus, it has so many moments, from that first meeting on the plane to the buildings crumbling, with that iconic Pixie song in the background. Fight Club may have gotten a little bit big for its britches, and it might stoke all sorts of psychoanalytic discussions. It may even have sparked more than a few very tired punchlines, but it's pretty hard to deny that the first time you saw it, you thought it was cool as hell. Number 1, The Social Network. It is not often the director can deliver the exact perfect film at the exact perfect time, but that was the case with The Social Network. Fincher dove into a story that wasn't just recent history, it was history as it was happening. The story of the founding of Facebook should not have been this compelling, but Fincher finds the heart of the characters and the interactions and what drives all of it and lays out the most honest possible version. He makes coding look cool, but also keeps it kind of real in a way that war games, real science, and even my guilty pleasure hackers could only dream up. The Aaron Sorkin script certainly keeps everything moving, but Fincher's direction and editing don't just keep pace with the crisp dialogue, they propel it even more, finding that space right between the clever writing and the cool/moody Reznor and Ross soundtrack. The fact that this lost Best Picture to The King's Speech is one of the greatest travesties in Oscar history. And that's it. Please let me know in the comments below how you rate these 10 films. I think there are arguments to be made for almost all of them, and I would love to hear them. Also, please like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you all next time.